In this video, we're going to be discussing how to solve two-step equations in one variable. Now, to get started, let's look at a problem. So you finally decide to pack up your old DVDs. Now, for those of you who don't know, that's how we got movies. You'd go to the store, you'd get your little disc, and that's how you would watch movies before you could download them. Anyways, you have 3 boxes that are the same size to pack your 40 DVDs. After putting the same number of DVDs in each box, you have 4 DVDs left over. How many DVDs were you able to fit in each box? So for this particular problem, we need to start by looking at what we're trying to find. Now, for the purpose of this, we're trying to find how many DVDs we could fit in each box. So let's jump back here. So that's what we are looking for. Let me get a pen. Let's go blue. How many DVDs were you able to fit in each box? So since this is an unknown, something we are looking for, we're going to make a variable to describe this. Now remember, a variable describes something that is unknown, something we're trying to solve for. So we're going to have x here, and this represents number of DVDs in each box. When you're starting with a variable, it's a really good idea to define what it means, so that way you can kind of help figure out things. It makes it easier just to define it. So now we're going to see if we can set up an equation to solve this problem. So let's look at some important information. So I see here, first of all, that I have 4 DVDs left over. I have a total of 40 DVDs, and I have 3 boxes. Okay, so what I'm kind of thinking here is I know that my total number of DVDs is 40. So what I think is going to happen is I'm going to have something equal to 40 because that's how many I have in total. Now, how am I going to get this total? Well, I have 3 boxes worth. Okay, so if I have 3 boxes, well, it's 3 times how many are in each box? Well, I don't know yet, so that's an x. So I'm going to have 3x, 3 times the number of DVDs in the box. But I also have this 4 left over. So I have 3 in the box plus 4 left over. So I've set up my equation, and I'm going to solve this. But before I do, just kind of hold this in the back of your mind. What I want to talk about is I want to talk about shoes again. So if you watch the video about order of operation, we talked about shoes, and I want to kind of use that to translate for this particular example. So if you remember, we had our shoe. Now in this case, our X is going to represent our foot. So remember when we were putting on shoes, how did we do that? Well, we started by putting on a sock. So that's how we started. So we put on a sock, and then we put on our shoe. Now, solving equations is very similar. If you think about it, I want to get the x that is buried beneath the shoe and sock. So let's think about what am I going to do to get rid of these things so that my foot is by itself, so the x is isolated. So what will we do first? Well, let's think about it. The first thing I would do is I would take off my shoe. That's the first thing I would do. And then after taking off my shoe to get my foot by itself, I would take off my sock. And that's how I would isolate my foot and get my foot by itself. In this case, that represents the x. Now, when we're solving equations, this idea of putting on and taking off is really a representation of this term inverse operations. Now, inverse operations are operations that undo each other. And we just saw a really good example. So like when I put on shoes, I put on a sock, I put on a shoe. And to undo that, I take off a shoe. So taking off my shoe, mark that, undoes putting on my shoe. And taking off my sock undoes putting on the sock. Those are inverse operations of each other. Now in math, we have inverse operations as well. And if you've been in a math class, you probably already know this, but the big ones are addition undoes subtraction and vice versa. So subtraction undoes addition. And multiplication and division, they are inverses. So to undo multiplication, we divide. To undo division, we multiply. So those are the big inverse operations we're going to be looking at. Now to solve equations, I'm going to look at a series of steps that are going to help you solve it. And we're going to use something called Graspable Math to do this in just a second. But here are the steps we're going to be looking at for solving equations. Now, there's a whole bunch of steps. We'll get to the first four later. But the big ones we're going to look at now is we're going to look at undoing addition and subtraction first. And then afterwards, we undo multiplication and division. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the Graspable Math screen. Now your screen already looks like this because you should be watching this video inside of the Graspable Math screen. So right now the video should be here. Mine says video here because I'm making the video. So what we're going to do is we're going to solve the equation that we just wrote. And I left it blank. I didn't put it on here because I want you to insert it. So to input an equation, what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to the Insert tab. It's in the top left. So I'm going to start by clicking Insert and then Math Expression. So it brings up this little keyboard that I'm going to use to type in the equation that we had. So you can click on the keyboard or you can use your actual keyboard to type it, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do 3x and just use x like the letter x plus 4 equals 40. I'm going to type in my expression, and when I'm done, I'm just going to click Done. And there it is. Now, to move your object, you see here how I hover over the left, it turns in these little arrows. I can click it on the left and scoot it over. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to isolate this X. I want to figure out how many DVDs are in each box. So what I'm going to do, since this is called Graspable Math, I'm going to start grabbing some things. So our step was to first undo this addition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this 4. So you see how the 4 turns blue? Now watch this. I can move it around. And I'm going to move it to the other side of the equals because when I want to get x by itself, that means I want to move everything to the other side of the equals. So I'm going to move this 4 over here. Now you see when I drag it over here, there's a little blue line, and I'm going to let go. Now notice what happened. The equation went from a plus 4 to a minus 4. So to undo a plus 4, I subtract 4 from both sides. Now in Graspable Math, to go ahead and finish that calculation, I click the minus sign, and it does 40 minus 4 for me. Next, I need to undo this times 3. Well, the opposite of times is divide. So I'm going to take this and drag it over, and you notice how it turns to division. So to undo times 3, I divide by 3. Then when I click the little division bar, it's 12. So I have 12 DVDs in each box. Now here's something that I want you to do. You see when I hover over here, there are these little dots. What you're going to do is you're going to click and drag down. And when you click and drag down, you see you have all of the steps of your work. So when I ask you to do a problem and show your work, this is what I'm looking for. I want you to click and drag so that way you can see all of the problems or all of the steps that you did. So I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to do these next two, and then you're going to do these two. So I want to solve this equation here. So I've got 3x plus 7 equals negative 8. So if we follow our steps, the first thing I want to undo is this plus 7. So I'm going to grab the 7. I'm going to bring it over, and notice it turns to a minus 7 because I want to undo it. So I subtract 7 from both sides. Let's do that calculation. So that gives me negative 15. Next, I have this 3x. So to undo times 3, I'm going to take 3, drag it under, and it turns to division. So instead of multiplying by 3, I'm dividing by 3. And when I do that calculation, I get a solution of negative 5. Now, the directions say show my work, so I'm going to click and drag and show my work. Oh, so since I'm a little bit over, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag this down just a little bit so I can see everything. There we go. So I've showed all my steps. I subtracted 7, I divided by 3, and there I go. All right, let's try this one. So again, following my steps, I want to start by undoing this addition. So I undo addition with subtraction. So I bring over the 8, and it turns to subtraction. So I get negative 14. Now here I've got this 1/3. So how do we undo a 1/3? That's a great question. Well, I'm just going to click the 1/3 and bring it over and see what happens. It turns to times. Now let's think about why that's the case. Because if I have 1/3 times 3, what do we get? We get 1. So when I multiply, or to undo a fraction, if you want to multiply by the denominator, at least if the numerator is 1, it'll simplify for you. And so I get x is negative 42. So I'm a little concerned about my space. Let me scoot this down. And so I get my solution of negative 42. So what I want you to do is pause the video and try these two equations. See if you can use Graspable Math, because this video is in Graspable Math. See if you can solve the first one, and I'll go over it here in just a second. All right, let's go for it. So the first thing I want to do is undo this subtraction. So I have minus 11, so I'm going to take this 11 and I'm going to get it back. Again, it's like taking off your shoe. So I just took off my shoe. And so notice it changes to plus 11. So to undo minus 11, we add 11. So it gives me a value of negative 9. Next, to undo this divide by negative 3, I'm going to click and drag. What do you think it's going to become? Multiplication, because it was division. So to undo divide by negative 3, we multiply. And so I get a solution of 27. So I'm going to scroll down, show all my work. There we go. So I added 11 to both sides, I multiplied by negative 3, and there's my solution. So try the next one. I want you to pause the video and see what you come up with. All right, let's get into it. So first things first, I need to undo this minus 4. Now, it looks like it's just a negative, but actually, I'm going to scoot it over here. It's the same thing as 5x minus 4. They're the same, so it doesn't change anything. So to undo this minus 4, I'm going to add it to both sides. Let me bring it over here. So I add 4, and I get a value of negative 60. Next, to undo this times 5, I'm going to divide by 5. So negative 60 divided by 5 is negative 12. So then I'm going to show all my steps. So I see that, there we go. I undid subtraction, I added to both sides, and then I divided. So that concludes our tutorial on how to use Graspable Math and how to solve two-step equations.